Hi, I'm Jeremy Caplan. I'm excited to share with you an idea that I've been working on about creating your own taste atlas. The idea is that you can map your own reading and movie viewing preferences and discover more about your own tastes and discover new kinds of books and movies that might excite you. So, the first part of this, the rationale, why would you do this, is to strengthen your own self understanding, to discover more about your own tastes and what resonates with you, whether it's books, movies, or eventually other kinds of media forms. You can also expand your horizons. You can discover new books, new movies that you might never have encountered had you not had an AI assistant to collaborate with. And I want to show you in this session a few ways to actually create your own taste profile. I'll show you some examples of how I've done it, and then I'll do a live demo to illustrate how you could do this really easily with either free or paid AI tools. So the tools I'm relying on for the most part are the four core iterative AI tools: ChatGPT, Claude, Google's Gemini, and Microsoft's Copilot. There are some other specialized AI tools, and there are many other new tools in development. One that I'll briefly mention is Notebook LM. But these four are a great starting point. If you already use one of them, that's a great place to start. And I'll show you a couple examples as we go. One of the ones that I've used most is Claude. I have a pro Claude account, so I use a Claude project where I can upload a lot of past examples of reading lists and highlights that I've made. But you can also use the free Claude version to get started with creating your own taste profile, your taste atlas, as I like to call it. So if you are using a project, you basically upload a few files. These can be PDFs, documents of other kinds, and even Google Docs with lists of your favorite books or favorite movies. You can also just paste them in text-wise, and you can set some custom instructions. You can give Claude a sense of how you want to analyze these books and movies. In my post that accompanies this piece that I'm working on, you'll see lots of examples of those prompts and instructions that you can use. Here's an example of one that I created. This was a trend archaeology taste atlas. So I was looking at a lot of journalism reports that I'd read in years past, but hadn't looked at recently. And the idea was to ask Claude to assess some of the patterns and themes across the years in many of these old journalism reports from Pew, the Reuters Institute, and other journalism organizations. And I asked it to generate some surprising, creative, unusual, provocative ideas for journalism coverage I might explore, or questions I might dive into. And you can see that it gave me a lot of interesting ideas, and I asked it for citations for where that material appeared in the original reports. So this is a specific kind of taste atlas, which is looking at a specific subset of my reading, in this case, journalism reports. More broadly, though, you can take all of your favorite books, right? Or if your favorite books of the past year or whatever subset of your favorites that you want to focus on. And these can be written out by hand, and you can take a picture of it, and the AI will actually analyze your handwriting and understand the list of authors or books that you've written down. You can take a picture of your bookshelf at home or in your office, and the AI will actually recognize the titles of the books that you're taking pictures of. You can use a Google Doc where you've written down your list, or a spreadsheet. There's a lot of different ways to get your picks, your favorites, into the AI, to feed the AI with the list of favorites you want it to analyze. You can do this with ChatGPT. You can also do this with any of the other AI platforms. And you can even create a custom GPT, which is basically a specialized bot where you feed those lists. And then in the future, you can have ongoing conversations with that bot about your books, asking it to recommend other books, asking it to recommend movies or plays or artworks that relate to the books that you love or the movies that you love. You can even create a shared one for your book group or a club or your family or any other group. And with custom GPTs, you can actually share them. So that's an advantage of doing it, in this case, creating a taste atlas as a custom GPT. You can use Google's new Gemini model. I've been experimenting with 2.0, their experimental model, and talking to it about my interest in books and authors that I love and movies that I like. And that's a nice way to have a conversational interaction with an AI. You can do the same thing with ChatGPT's advanced voice mode, and you can even use Perplexity's new voice mode on your phone if you're a fan of that particular platform. With Gemini, one of the things I asked it to do, I gave it some highlights that I'd collected in Readwise, and I had those exported from Readwise. Now there's a way to basically export a Google Doc of your Readwise highlights, and I imported that into Gemini. I could only use 1.5, model 1.5, because model 2.0 doesn't yet accept imported documents. That will likely change over time. And so I asked it to do some analysis, and then afterwards I asked it, based on that analysis, write a one-paragraph summary of the kinds of insights I tend to highlight. Now, 10 years of highlights is hard to boil down into one paragraph, but this is a starting point, and I can then have a dialogue with the AI assistant to get more nuance and more detail. And I can also ask for specific examples of writers and thinkers who I should explore further because they write about topics of interest to me based on the highlights that I've made over these past 10 years in various books and online articles, et cetera. So that's what I did here. And I got some suggestions. James Lang happens to be an author I already really like. Greg McCune, same thing. But there were several on this list who I hadn't encountered yet. And this gave me an inspiration to go and check out those new writers and authors and expand my own cultural horizons and learn more. Notebook LM is also a fantastic tool for this. You can create a whole notebook with your taste atlas. And one of the exciting things is if you put in your highlights, for example, or your favorite books, you can give it a custom prompt to give you a specific recording, a specific audio analysis that applies to any question that you have. So here's a little excerpt from one that I created with Notebook LM based on highlights that I'd made over the past 10 years. And this is just a short excerpt of one section of that.
Now, another thing that jumped out at me was this whole idea of balancing patience and persistence.
Hmm.
Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers, he's all about dedication, right? Putting in the time, the work.
Right. But you also highlighted Oliver Berkman's idea from 4,000 Weeks about being willing to walk away when your time's up, even if it drives you crazy to leave a project unfinished.
Yes. And I think that's so key, especially for someone like you, Jeremy, who's juggling so many things. It's about finding that sweet spot between pushing towards a goal, but also recognizing your own limits. It's about making it sustainable, you know?
And speaking of mind-blowing, you had this note about Annie Murphy Paul's The Extended Mind. It's this idea that our minds aren't just, well, in our heads.
Right. It's influenced by our environment, our bodies, our interactions, everything.
Wild. So how could Jeremy use
And
that
so
to be...
these are bots, right? This is an AI analysis that's transformed into an audio piece. And that's a unique way of capitalizing on your taste atlas with Notebook LM. So now I want to dive into some actual examples. I'm going to open up Claude here to show you an example of how I did this for a book group, a collection of books of more than 80 books that we've read in a book group that I facilitate over the years. And what I asked it to do was to carefully and slowly read the list of books and then to analyze that. And it gave me an analysis of the kinds of books that we've chosen and described that we're generally reading books with a kind of cultural breadth. We have Japanese literature, Middle Eastern voices, Indian authors, European perspectives. It gave me specific examples from our book list. And it helped me kind of think through and analyze the different categories of books that we've read over the years. Then I asked it to help me with the selection criteria. So based on these books that we've selected, how would the AI summarize the selection criteria that we've been using? And it gave me a whole bunch of selection criteria points about the length of the books, the types of books, literary quality, depth of themes, cultural and historical range, literary recognition and credibility, discussion potential, writing style, and more, diversity of voices. And then I said, now, given that criteria, consider the ones that have been some of our favorites so far. And I gave it a list of some of the favorites of the group. And I asked it to summarize what are the ones that have seemed to resonate most with the book group members. And it gave me a detailed analysis of that. And following that, I asked it to next help me pick some possible books for the next set of books that we're going to read as a book group. And it gave me some helpful suggestions, some of which we'll likely read in the years ahead. So this is an example of how you use a taste atlas and how I've used a taste atlas with a book group. You could similarly do this for yourself, for your own reading plan or your own movie plan or your own exploration of plays or art or food or other subjects. Now I'm going to demo how I prompt ChatGPT to help me create a taste atlas. This is just a blank ChatGPT interface. I'm going to upload a file to begin with, which is some of my favorite books. These are actually books that we read in a particular book group. So you can see the file is a PDF, and it is going to take a moment to ingest that document. And then I'm going to give it a prompt. I have the prompt pre-written. So I'm just going to tell it that it's a perceptive literary critic and cultural analyst with deep knowledge. I won't read you the whole prompt. It's in the Wonder Tools piece about creating a taste atlas. And I'm just going to let it do that analysis. So it'll take a minute to kind of digest the prompt, digest the material that it's ingested, and then it's going to give me a literary taste profile. And I've asked it to conclude with a 1-paragraph summary of my literary taste profile. So you can see it's already starting to develop a summary of the primary themes and topics, then looking at the genre preferences and style patterns. It's including references to the particular books like Caleb's Crossing and People of the Book. It is also referencing other books in this list, including epistolary forms that I've enjoyed, like 84 Charing Cross Road. And after that analysis, it's giving me a summary, a full summary of the books that I've read. Now I'm going to ask it to go a little further because I want a little bit more analysis. And I'm going to say, following up on this analysis, I want it to give me a list of additional books that aren't on that reading list that I might enjoy. And I'm asking it to make note of why it's recommending those books. So you can see it's recommending a whole bunch of different kinds of books, from Pachinko and A Fine Balance to All the Light We Cannot See, The Night Circus, Days Without End. It's got a lot of interesting titles here, which I'm excited to explore. And it's explained helpfully why those titles are of interest. Now, I could go in more depth and ask it for other recommendations based on the same material. I could ask it to explain more about why a particular book might be relevant or of interest. For now, I'm going to move on to movies. And I'm going to say, let's now move on to movies. And basically asking it to do a similar analysis, giving it a role to play as an insightful film critic and cultural analyst with extensive knowledge of cinema across genres and cultures, etc. And I'm going to ask it to examine a list of 30 of my favorite films. So I have to attach that file. It doesn't matter if I attach it before or after writing the prompt. And I have an image of those movies, but I want to include actual text, a PDF file. I tried once with a CSV file, and which is this file, and it didn't actually read that, understand it well. So I'm going to just use a simple PDF. I've compiled that originally in an app called Listy, and I exported the CSV from Listy, imported it into Google Sheets, and exported a PDF just to make sure it could understand that. So now I'm going to type that in. It has now this list of 30 movies. I have relatively ordinary movie tastes, not a film expert by any means. And it's giving me some genre preferences, visual style patterns, looking at all of these 30 different movies, and gives me a helpful way of starting to understand better some of the aspects that these movies have in common, some of the interesting characteristics they have in common, maybe some of the distinctions that they have. And it's giving me a whole range of material here to explore, and then finally giving me a summary of that material. And I'm going to do the same thing I did for books, where I'm going to say, following up on this analysis, give me 10 more movies that might be of interest to me. Now, it has no way of knowing whether I've watched the movies that it recommends, right? Other than the fact that they're not on this list of 30 that I've given it. So I'll be curious to see if it recommends movies that I've actually already enjoyed. Good Will Hunting is one that I have enjoyed. Midnight in Paris, another one. But many of these others I have not yet watched. So this is a really good list for me to explore. Now, I can go further, and I've saved a few additional prompts that I can use. So, for example, I can ask it to take one specific theme from my taste profile and suggest works that explore it in radically different ways across genres and cultures. And so one of the themes in my taste profile was about human resilience, and it's giving me a whole bunch of different films. I loved Rashomon, the Japanese film. These others I have not seen. It's giving me some really interesting book recommendations on that theme. So you can see how you can build on your taste profile and your taste atlas to get other kinds of recommendations or explore other kinds of material. It's even giving me music recommendations, which is kind of interesting. A couple of other examples of follow-up posts. Find works from cultures I haven't explored, at least in the context of those lists. This is a way to extend my awareness or broaden my horizons to cultures around the world. The Vegetarian by the South Korean author who won the Nobel Prize recently is one that I'm really actually excited to read. So I like the fact that it recommended that. I have not heard of this first book by this author from Oman, nor this book from an author from Sudan. So these are really good eye-openers for me. I did read Persepolis, which was terrific, and I'm excited to dive in deeper to this list let's get another one of these extended analysis. This one looks, instead of looking at different cultures, I'm asking it to recommend works from different decades or centuries that shared some DNA with my favorites and show how my modern preferences, a lot of the movies are modern and a lot of the books on my list are relatively modern, might connect to other works from previous periods. So it's giving me some earlier 18th century and 19th century works, early 20th century works, giving me some classics. And a number of these I have read, but there might be some in here as it develops that I haven't. And so that will be helpful to me to think about and maybe give me some new ideas to explore further. One last one I want to share is asking it to look across genres. This is asking the AI to look at material from books that I love, right? And look for book films that span across genres in unexpected ways. You can also ask it for, based on the books that you like, what films would you enjoy? And similarly, based on films that you like, what books would you enjoy? That's another way to approach this. So this hopefully illustrates how you create the Taste Atlas by uploading your documents, your favorites, and then how you use the Taste Atlas to analyze your tastes and then also to recommend new things to broaden your cultural horizons. I hope this is useful for you, and I'm curious to see what you create with your own Taste Atlas and how you use it and what variations on this approach you try and you find value with. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to your feedback and input.